Hey everybody, it's Corbin. Welcome to the channel for those of you who are new to Free the Me TV. Thank you for joining us, and welcome back to everyone who has been with us for a while now. Again, thank you all for joining us as well. Last night, we began our study of Odyssey of the Christian Mind with the creation narrative, which is found in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. Again, Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and chapters 1 and 2 are the first and second chapter of the very first book of the Bible, which is Genesis. We are continuing tonight with the Sodom account. This also takes place in Genesis. This is Genesis chapter 19, verses 1 through 9. And we're just going to barrel right on through. We're going to continue with the next account. This is the next most used account for people in the Christian church refuting homosexuality and saying that it's wrong and that anybody a part of the LGBT community is going to hell and things like that. So we are going to keep it pushing. We're going to move right forward. Hopefully you guys watched Odyssey of the Christian Mind creation narrative, Genesis 1 and 2. That was the video from yesterday. If not, I will put that link in the description below for this video so that you guys can go back and take a look at it, so you guys are familiar with where I'm coming from, so you guys know what is going to be going on. So like I said, tonight we're going to go over the Sodom account, and we're just going to keep it rolling. Tonight, we have a little bit of an easier night, only because there's no terminology that I need to give you guys for tonight. And there are no sources that I need to give you guys, that I need to cite, that I quoted directly from. But we are also in a little bit of a more difficult situation, simply because tonight is our first account where we have to deal with context. So tonight we're going to, last night we explored terminology. Tonight we are being introduced to our first exploration of context and things being taken out of context. So I'm not going to continue to drivel on. We are going to get into this, so let's get started. Like I said before, tonight's study comes from the Sodom account, which is in Genesis chapter 19, verses 1 through 9. Again, forgive me if I'm not looking at the camera as I'm speaking. I have all of my information written down so that it can be accurate for you guys. A lot of people don't know, but this is, like I said in last night's video, we hear it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And that is one of the number one things that people a part of the LGBT community hear from Christians who are refuting homosexuality. Forgive me for my hand being in the camera. But this is one of the number one stories. This is one of the number one reasons. This is one of the main go-to stories that people use, and that is the Sodom account. And that is because it is taken so much out of context. But we're going to read that. So I'm just going to start by giving you my information. So before we can really get into this and understand why it's so backwards and why people use it to refute homosexuality in the church, we must first understand the context of this biblical account. According to this story, God sent two angels to warn Abraham's nephew Lot about the impending doom or destruction of the city of Sodom. So let's pause for 1 second. I need you guys to understand this. I need you guys to catch that, because it doesn't sound like much, but I need you to catch it. Before even sending the angels to Abraham's nephew Lot, who was living in Sodom at the time, before God even sent those angels there, he intended to destroy Sodom. Now, if we were to go backwards in Genesis a little bit and read before this account, we see that God spoke to Abraham and told Abraham that he was going to destroy the city of Sodom. He was actually going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. They were neighboring cities. And he said he was going to destroy them for their immorality. Some versions have specified immorality. They believe that they've got it down and they've been able to specify that, oh, God meant sexual immorality. But in the majority of translations and versions that I've read, it just says he was destroying them for their immorality. Immorality can be many different things. I just want to put that out there. So I need you guys to understand that, like I said, and I've said it twice, I'm going to say it a third time because it's that important to the context of this story. Before God even sent the angels to Lot to warn him about Sodom's destruction, he had already planned to destroy Sodom. So, whatever God's reason was for destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, for whatever his reasons were for destroying those neighboring cities, the destruction had to do, it was already present, it was already in the works well before this event. So I need you guys to understand that. People try and isolate the two and say, well, God sent the angels because he was going to destroy the cities because of this. But it doesn't say that. It simply puts it out there. God had already planned on destroying these cities well before this instance happened. So the story continues on, and it says the angels came to the city of Sodom, and Lot welcomed them into his home, and he prepared a meal for them. He basically had a little dinner party for them. Then a group of men, a group of inhabitants of Sodom, the men, surrounded the house where Lot was and where the angels were. And basically they were banging on the door and they were shouting, "Where's those men that you invited into your house? We want to have sex with them." Right now, I need you guys to picture this. This is a group of men. This is like the entire city of men, the entire city of Sodom. The men that make up the populace, that make up the population of Sodom, are banging on this man's door, asking for these two people who came to his home as a guest because they want to have sex with him. So Lot refused to give the men, well, the angels, but they presented themselves as men, and Lot refused to give them to the inhabitants of Sodom. Instead, he gave them this reason. He said, look, I've got two daughters and they've never slept with any men. Let me give them to you and you can do with them whatever it is you want. Just don't do anything to these men because they came under my roof for protection. If you want to look that up, I paraphrased it, but if you want to look that up, that is in Genesis chapter 19, verse 8. The crowd of men, even after Lot offered his virgin daughters to these men, the crowd insisted on what they wanted. They insisted that they wanted the two men that came to Lot's house as guests, and they tried to break down the door. It got so bad that the angels reached outside, pulled Lot back into his house, and blinded the crowd so that Lot and the angels and his family could get away. Well, not the angels, they stayed behind to destroy the city, but blinded the crowd of men so that Lot and his daughters could flee the city, and his wife could flee the city without being seen, right? So that's the story. Again, you can find that in Genesis chapter 19, verses 1 through 9. But if we're going to interpret this event, we have to start at the very beginning. So first of all, we have to take into account this entire situation. Whatever is happening in this story is a form of rape. Pay attention to the language. Pay attention to how this was written. The crowd of men basically wanted to gangbang. They wanted to sexually assault these two angels. They wanted to pass them around. Forgive me if this terminology is too much for y'all, but they wanted to run a train on these two angels, right? The situation, the whole thing is just a big convoluted mess because not only did they want to rape these men, but there's so much violence in this story, number one, because Lot basically, he invited these men to his house, the angels, and the inhabitants of Sodom were basically going to break in the door of his home so they could get to these two men so that they could pass them around to one another. Now, I'm sorry, but I have to interject this here. That doesn't sound like any normally functioning, any normally thinking person, gay, straight, bi, flying purple people eater, that I've ever heard of in my life. Because I'm sorry, if somebody says no, they mean no. And unless there is something going on in your head that makes you sick, a rapist, which is sick, unless there's something going on in your head that makes you hear no and think something else, you're not going to continue to try and break down the door of someone's home to get to them. So that's number one. This story is very violent. And these men did not want to consensually have sex with these angels. They wanted to rape them. So I need you guys to wrap that around your heads first. Here's where people go off. A lot of people believe that Lot, in his offering of his daughters to the inhabitants of Sodom instead of these two angels, they try to imply that homosexual sex would have been worse than heterosexual sex. They try to imply that, well, Lot offered his daughters because he knew that homosexuality was just wrong. So he figured, if you guys are going to have sex with anybody, if you're going to run a train on anybody, run a train on my daughters because they're virgins and it's heterosexual. No. Because Lot actually gives the reason for offering his daughters instead of those angels. Lot says, do not do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. Now, most people are like, what does that matter? It doesn't matter. They came under the protection of his roof. Yay, wonderful. Here's why this is significant. Here's the problem. See, because in our time, oh, they came to visit me. They're guests in my house. But at the end of the day, they're still their own person. That's our time. But in this time, hospitality was a sacred concept. And Lot expressed that distinction, when he said, these men have come under the protection of my roof. They've come as guests. So here's where people miss it. Here's the disconnect. Lot offered his daughters, not because he thought it would be so much better for them to rape his daughters, but simply because his daughters had been inhabitants of Sodom right along with him, right along with those men. They were raised in Sodom, which means 9 times out of 10, they knew those men. So, as a parent, I can think this. In this time, as a parent, in that time, the time of Lot, I would, in my mind, concoct this line of thinking. You know what? My daughters were raised here. They know these men, and these men know them. These men want to rape these two guys that have come to my house as guests, but because they've been around since my daughters were born and my daughters were raised here, maybe they won't treat them that way. Maybe it'll knock some sense into these guys' heads and they'll think better. Now, I don't know if that's the case. It's speculation here, but that's the train of thought that will go through my mind. So, after taking all that into due consideration, here's what I can say. Even considering all of that, if we were to accept the notion, and if we were to accept the straight distinction that it's gender-based, right? If we were to accept that, oh, well, it's women that Lot is offering to the men of Sodom and not men, and so that makes a difference. If we were to accept that line of thinking, we could only conclude that what the author of this particular pericope is saying is that homosexual rape is worse than heterosexual rape, which then leads you to say, what? Rape is rape is rape. So that kicks that one out. So that leaves me to say this. To use this story, the Sodom account, to condemn all homosexual behavior is completely unfounded, and it's actually really stretching the story outside of its context and outside of its historical framework. But people do it every day, so obviously that's what happened. So let me break it down to you. I'm going to give you a sentence and see if I can break it down to you guys like you're 3 years old. You ready? Saying that homosexual rape is worse than heterosexual rape and using this story to condemn all homosexual behavior. That's almost like using the story of David and Bathsheba, which, if you're not familiar with that, I will give you the information for that as well. Basically, the background story is David was the king. He was up on his roof. He saw Bathsheba, who was someone else's wife, taking a shower, basically had her brought to his house, had sex with her, and then killed her husband. In a nutshell, that's that story. So using the Sodom account to condemn all homosexual behavior is like saying the story of David and Bathsheba. Let me rephrase it. Using the Sodom account to condemn all homosexual behavior is like using the David and Bathsheba account to condemn all heterosexual behavior. So, hope you guys enjoyed tonight's video. Again, there wasn't a lot of terminology for this video. It was a lot more context. So we were introduced to the battles of the context. Our next account will be the Holiness Code, and that is coming from Leviticus 18:22 and then 20 and 13. So again, that is Leviticus chapter 18 verse 22 and Leviticus chapter 20 verse 13. This is called the Holiness Code. In this account, you're going to run into terminology and context. So be prepared. That episode, that account is going to be a little bit bigger. There's going to be a little bit more information for you guys. But if you stuck with me this long, I feel like you guys can handle it. You guys are awesome. I just want to say thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for taking the time to watch these videos. I really hope that they're helping someone. I really hope that someone is learning something, as well as getting a little bit of encouragement and feeling like just because they grew up in the church hearing one thing, that's not the end-all be-all for them. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will again leave the link to the creation narrative down in the description. If you guys have anything you want me to talk about, but yes, if you guys have any questions, comments, topics you'd like me to talk about, questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to say at all, leave them down in the description. Leave them down in the comment section below. Forgive me, my brain's a little muddled. If you have anything you want to send to me privately that you want me to talk about, anything at all, you can send me a message on Facebook. That will be in the description. And you can also send me an email. That'll be in the description as well. But I thank you guys. Like I said, again, I thank you for tuning in. I hope you're learning. I hope you are understanding. And I hope you are enjoying this. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Much love.